Okay, good morning, everyone. We are now live. Mayor Joy Burley, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Brittany. Good morning, everybody. Brittany, would you take the roll call, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate that you are present for the record. Mayor Joy Burley.
Four.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
Present.
Mayor Scott Mackey.
Present.
And Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
Present.
Okay, and let the record reflect that also with us is Township of Georgian Bluffs Treasurer Carmen Kruger, Township of Chatsworth Treasurer Carmen Kruger, Township of Georgian Bluffs Treasurer Cassandra Rocca, CAO Clerk of the Township of Chatsworth Patty Cinnamon, and also with us we have Tracy Smith and Navi Riyar. I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly, from BDO.
Okay. Thank you. You can declare your interest anytime you see fit during the meeting. Approval of the agenda. Do you have somebody to move to put this on the floor, please?
So Mayor Mackey has his hand raised, so we'll move by him.
No, it's Deputy Mayor. Mayor Scott, get your hand up.
Yes.
Okay, and I believe Brian has his hand up. Seconded. We'll just use first names, a lot easier. Is there any concern for the agenda? Seeing none, Brittany, would you take the vote, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against adoption of the agenda as presented. Mayor Joy Burley.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
Mayor Scott Mackey.
In favor.
And Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, previous minutes of March 13th. I have a recommendation that the joint board adopts the minutes of the meeting held on March 13th, 2020. You have a mover to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Brian.
I'll move it.
Is there any questions on those minutes since they're quite a long time ago? Seeing none, Brittany, would you take the vote, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against adoption of the minutes as presented. Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
Mayor Scott Mackey.
In favor.
And Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. We're down to presentations. Tracy Smith from BDO, our auditors, you have the floor.
Okay, just bear with me for 1 minute. I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see Tracy's presentation.
So while Brittany's bringing that up, I'd like to thank the board for having me here this morning. As we mentioned earlier, Navi Rear is from BDO, the senior, is also with us today and can answer any questions that you have. We are, looks like we have the report up on your screen. If Brittany, you could just scroll down to the summary. Yeah, right there. I'm going to just give a quick summary of this report to the board. It is the required communications under auditing standards. It is fairly similar to prior years. There are a few little differences in here that we'll talk about, and we'll do a high-level overview of the financial statements. If you have any questions, I think we'll do them at the end of the presentation, just so it's easier to when we're doing this virtually. The status of the audit: the financial statements are in draft until approved by the board, and once we have approval, we'll need to obtain a signed representation letter and subsequent events up until the report of the due date. Materiality was $13,000 that we used for the audit, internal control matters. There were no deficiencies in the controls that were tested. However, the audit report is qualified for completeness of revenue, as it's not possible to obtain corroborating evidence to measure the product of being accepted into being accepted. So that is similar to the prior year. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Independence, we confirm that we are independent. On the next page, unadjusted differences. So again, there's no unadjusted differences in the financial statements. However, this year we have put a measurement uncertainty note relating to the accounts receivable, and that's been added to the financial statements to reflect the uncertainty of whether there's a $58,000 receivable from one customer, and there's some uncertainty on whether that will be collected. It is actively being pursued, but should that not be collected, because of the significance of that, we've mentioned that in the notes to the financial statements. The representation letter is in Appendix C, and that's just a quick summary of the required communications. Are there any questions on that before we move to the financial statements?
I see no hands up, Tracy, but is there anyone I'm missing?
So let's get into the numbers, and Brittany, if you can scroll down quite a few pages to Appendix A, which is the audit report. And one more page, please. Thank you. So on your screen is the independent auditors report. The financial statements have been prepared by management. BDO's role as your auditor is to provide an opinion on the financial statements that are prepared by management, and whether these financial statements are in accordance with public sector accounting standards. The audit opinion is the highest level of assurance that we can provide, and the opinion is right there at the is the first paragraph. As in prior years, you'll note that we do have a qualification, so it's not possible for us to obtain evidence to verify the tipping and sewage fees, the completeness of that. The second paragraph, other than that possible issue with the completeness of revenue, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. The audit report is lengthy, and it does go on to explain the roles of management, the auditor, and those charged with governance. That format was changed last year to be a longer format, but there have been no changes since that. If we go to the statement of financial position, yep, right there. The financials, this is the statement of financial position, or your balance sheet. So it's a point in time at December 31st, 2019. As we are doing this virtual meeting, everyone is aware that things have changed drastically in the world since December 31st, 2019. But the financial statements are a historic record of your transactions. So at that time, on December 31st, you did have cash in the bank of $205,000. However, we still do have a liability to the Township of Georgian Bluffs for $221,000 for providing funding to cover your cash flows. Accounts receivable, the $89,000, that includes a $58,000 that's owing from one customer. And again, so we have put a measurement uncertainty note later in the financial statements that If that is not collected, then that would affect your deficit and create a higher deficit. It is actively being pursued by your management team, so hopefully that will be collected. There's no change in the capital reserves or the future capital owing from the municipality. So as you are aware, the capital reserve funds are held off-site at the individual municipalities. So each municipality is holding $238,988 for the capital reserve. Your current amounts due to from the municipalities to the biodigester are just the November and December operating amounts owing. The liabilities, accounts payable and accrued liabilities, those are just general trade receivables or trade payables owing to vendors. Again, we talked about the due to Georgian Bluffs, $221,594 was owing at the end of December. That was being used to help cover the cash flows. During the year, Chatsworth did loan $75,000 to help with those cash flows. So Georgian Bluffs and Chatsworth do have each $75,000 in addition to Georgian Bluffs $221 that's owed from the biodigester. So that brings us down to net financial assets. So that's your assets less your liabilities. And that represents your capital surplus of $477,000 in reserve being held by each municipality, less $97,000 in accumulated operating deficit. So the operating deficit for the year was $114,000. You did have a little surplus that carried forward from the prior year, so there is an accumulated deficit of $97,000, and we'll give a further breakdown of that and the accumulated surplus just in a minute. So on the next page is your transactions for the year. Revenues for the year were $309,742. The expenses include the operating expenses and amortization. It does not include the capital payment that you did have $33,200 that is reflected as in your capital assets for the engine rebuild. So it doesn't show here as an expense on this statement, but it gets capitalized and put on your balance sheet. So when you are trying to compare the budget numbers to the actual numbers, 365,000 compared to 539, you have to back out the amortization at the top there. You can see that there's none budgeted, and the actual is 148. So that makes up most of the differences. In Appendix B, we have kind of taken these financial statements and trying to make them just in a quick, easy to read format. So I'll just take a minute with that. I'll go through that in just a minute. So then you come down to, if you can stay back on that, the previous page with I'm still in the, yep, I'm still there. Just want to make sure that we note that annual deficit of $229,791, that's not your operating deficit. That is your total overall annual deficit. The annual deficit or annual surplus is reported under public sector accounting standards to reflect your long-term planning. So normally you would see an annual surplus there and a fairly large number, because in most organizations you are trying to raise funds annually for capital purposes. That has not been the case in this organization. You're not building up reserves. Your capital reserves haven't changed in a number of years. So that is why you're seeing an annual deficit. But again, it's important to note that $229,000 isn't your operating deficit. That's the annual deficit. So that's saying that you're not covering the amortization which is basically an estimate to try to replace your capital assets. So then the next page starts with that annual deficit of $229,791, and then it backs out the amortization, but it also deducts the tangible capital assets, the $33,200 that was spent for the engine repair. So then you come down to an increase or decrease in net financial assets, and that represents your operating deficit for the year. So your operating deficit for the year was $114,170. And again, you did have some carry forward from the year before. So we'll just move on, and so I'm going to move on to the Appendix B. I'm not going to go through the rest of those statements. They are there for your complete reference, so that you are able to approve those, so that we can issue the official financial statements for the biodigester. And if we go down to Appendix B, I always try to break it down so that it's maybe a little easier to read. So here you'll see these numbers are the same as what's in the financial statements, but you'll see that the revenue, so the revenue was $309,742. Your operating expenses were $390,000 plus the $33,000 that you funded from operations for capital purposes, coming down to your operating deficit for the year of $114,170. So the reason that you do have, I should have put the budget numbers here so that it would have been easier for you to see, and I'll try to do that next year, to put the budget numbers on this report too. But the revenue was $55,000 less than your budget. Your operating expenses were $25,000 more than your budget, and the capital engine rebuild wasn't expected. So if you add $55,000 less revenue, $25,000 more in operating expenses, and $33,000 for the engine rebuild, that contributes to your operating deficit of $114,000.
Tracy, may I interrupt you, please? Cassandra,
Yep.
Cassandra, do you have a question?
I just wanted to add something. Sorry, Tracy, but while we're on the screen, it's a good time to say it. In 2018, we had a bit of a surplus, and that's partially because we were unable to do the digestate clean out, the spreading, in 2018 in the fall like we had planned. So because we didn't do it in 2018, we needed to do more of it in 2019, which is why when you look at that expense line, you see it's so much higher in 2019, and that's just because of the timing of the clean out. Okay, that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Cassie.
Thanks, Cassie. I forgot to mention that. So then on the next page you'll see the breakdown of what's included in your accumulated surplus. So on your balance sheet, at the bottom of your balance sheet, you saw an accumulated surplus of $3,299,934, and that's made up of three things. That's made up of your accumulated deficit of $97,209. So you'll see $16,961 was carried forward from the prior year. You had a current year operating deficit of $114,170. So your ending accumulated deficit is $97,209. You have $477,976 that is in capital reserve funds, and then you've invested just almost 3 million to 2.9 million in tangible capital assets to come to the $3.2 million that's accumulated surplus on your balance sheet. So that's just a quick high-level overview. If I'll stop there and take any questions that anyone has.
Questions from the board. I see Cassandra's hands up.
One more thing to add. I don't want the board to be concerned about the $58,000 that was receivable from one of the people at your end. Just to keep you up to date, that customer is typically slow to pay. And when I look at that account balance today, it's only $14,000. So we are collecting on that, and I have no concerns about collectability.
Thanks, Cassie. Does the board have other questions? Brittany, I cannot see everybody on the screen. I think Scott has his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to Cassandra, just in regards to that 58,000, do we have any measures in place that, when a customer gets to a certain amount that they have to pay before the service continues for them? Like, how far in debt would we get with one customer?
For this particular customer, no, we don't. It's one of our bigger contractors. We have a service agreement with them in place. They're just really slow at paying, and like they always pay eventually. They're just slow. So
Okay.
if it was a different vendor that we didn't have a contract with, it is something that we do monitor. But this one, for years, they've been like this. So.
Okay, well, thanks for that update. It makes me feel better knowing that they are paying.
They must have just recently paid then, did they, Cassie?
I pulled the account as of today while you were chatting, so I didn't look at the timing of the payment, but I do know that currently outstanding is only $14,000.
Okay, so that's great, because at the time we were preparing these financial statements, and the reason that we put that measurement uncertainty note in was because that at that time there hadn't been any payments since 2019. So
yeah.
That's excellent that it's been they've made a recent payment on that then.
Yeah, you can look at it as part of your subsequent events work. You'll see the payment.
So Tracy, as an auditor, you have to pick a certain time slot there is what you're doing. That's why you mentioned the 58?
Yes. So we could actually remove that measurement uncertainty note now if there has been collection. So because as we said before, the financial statements are draft, and so then we do subsequent event work up until the report date, and we hadn't done that subsequent event work until you prove it, and we would have found that payment was made. So if the board prefers to have that note removed, we could remove that note.
I would like to, but then again, I'm not a treasurer. Patty, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Burley. Just a comment as well on the revenues that our hydro generation was down about 35,000. I'm just wondering, was that strictly because of weather that we experienced back in the spring, or because that's significant? It's almost half of what our budgeted amount was. But $35,000 from over the previous year.
Looks like Tyler could answer that question for us. Go ahead, Tyler.
Thank you, Mayor Burley. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do a great a job as Troy Unrun would be able to do. Unfortunately, he was prioritized today with some different tasks. But the number one issue we're still having is feedstock, and I feel like it directly relates to getting the appropriate amount of feedstock in and keeping us running. I also know that we had a lot of foaming issues back in December and January, and continued on to February. But unfortunately, I can't entirely answer your question, but I know that's atypically the issue, and we're going through the same thing right now as well.
Tyler, I might say I think it has to do with it. I've been signing checks for rental of a heater to keep heat up in the biogester. Is that part of it, the problem?
Well, this that just started in 2020. So I don't know if that would be reflected in this report. I'm not 100% sure on the timing, but that's correct. We have been utilizing a boiler. Again, it started with the feedstock issue, which created to a foaming issue, and then we couldn't get the temps back up in the wintertime. That's and again, I'm not sure the extent of. I thought this was just till 2000, like the 2019, or is this the first quarter as well? Again, I'm a little bit new to this program here, but.
No, it's just to December 31st, 2019.
Yeah, so this wouldn't relate to the boiler. The boiler came in effect in February.
Okay, sorry for that. Going back to our original question, what is the board's wish? Do we want to have our financial statements adjusted to remove that clause? Am I saying that correct, Tracy?
Yeah. So we'd have to get some evidence there from Cassie to support the payment, but that shouldn't be an issue. And if there has been a recent payment, then it's down to 14,000. That's not that's a little bit more than materiality, but it does show evidence that the collectability is possible. When, like I said, when we were doing this, a payment had been received since February 2019. So we can remove that note if the board wishes.
Yeah, I think it's actually showing a truer statement of what's happening with our financial statement. Sue, I see you have your hand up.
I'm just wondering, are these statements supposed to reflect the actual at year end? Would it be normal to make a change based on something that happened after year end?
So the numbers wouldn't change, Sue. The accounts receivable would still reflect that there was $58,000 owing at December 31st, 2019. What would change would be just the note that's in the financial statements. There's a note. I'm not sure which note it is, but there's a note that says there's a measurement uncertainty because we don't have evidence that it's going to be collected. Since now it has been, we can just remove that disclosure note. The number doesn't change.
Cassie,
Okay.
Cassie, did you want to comment on that?
Take the note out, please.
Yeah, I agree, but could I have a show of hands from the board if they agree that we would remove that note? I see one hand, two hands. I have not got Brian on there, so I'm not sure if Brian's for it, but.
I can see his hand.
Oh, can you?
I'm in favor.
The Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble's hand was raised for the record.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like we got the direction to remove that note, Tracy.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that before we release the finals.
Okay. Does the board have any other questions on our Tracy's proposal today? Seeing no hands up, I think there's no questions then. Thanks very much, Tracy, for presenting our budget for us.
All right, and I will get those financial statements released to you as soon as possible once they are approved.
And thanks very much to, I believe is it Navi?
Yes, it's Navi.
Navi, well, thanks very much.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a motion to approve the statements on the agenda. So if you'd like to read the motion and have a mover and a seconder, I will take the vote.
Thanks, Brittany. I just had to read what's in front of me. I have a recommendation here that the joint board hereby approves the audit report as presented by BDO. Could I have somebody to move to put the motion on the floor, please?
You'll have to have the motion to say with the exception to remove that note if you want it removed.
Yeah, I think Brittany has indicated that as suggested. Is that okay, Brittany?
Tracy, do you have an identifying number for the note or anything you would like the motion to reflect?
It's note 5, measurement uncertainty.
Okay, so the motion has been amended to reflect the following: that the joint board hereby approves the audit report as presented by BDO with the removal of note 5, measure of uncertainty.
Thanks, Brittany. Do you have somebody to move to put the motion on the floor, please? I don't see any hands anywhere. Oh, there's Mayor Mackey moves it, and is there a seconder?
Deputy Mayor
Deputy-
Carlton raised her hand.
Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Brittany, would you take the vote, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Mayor Dwight Burley,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
For.
Mayor Scott Mackey,
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. So moving on for our agenda. Moving on to our agenda, we have no delegations. Correspondence. I have a recommendation here that the Georgian Bluffs Chatsworth Joint Board receive the January, February, March, and April 2020 monthly reports from Aqua Canada Water Services Incorporated, GSS Engineering Consulting Limited, for the information purposes. And do I have somebody to move the motion and put it on the floor, please?
It was moved by Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
Okay, moved by Brian, second by. I see no hands. Brittany, is there?
Deputy Mayor Carlton has her hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the reports? Tyler, do you want to comment on these reports, or?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Burley. I can do my best. Again, Troy Unrun is definitely our most qualified technician as our utilities coordinator to be doing this. So bear with me, but I'll do my best to answer any questions. I believe it was December or January last year when we had a slight tangle in the biodigester with an airline. This caused us to have to actually open up the biodigester and remediate this twisted line that we had in there is to feed the air. Once we completed that task, of course, it was done in the wintertime. We had a lot of difficulties getting the biodigester back up to temperature, of course, is during the wintertime. So this spawned the rental of a boiler unit, a temporary boiler unit, to get us back up to speed. And that has been, I actually misspoke before. I thought that was February. I just looked in the January report. That's when we installed it. It was mid-January. So that's where we've been for the last 3 or 4 months, is trying to get this biodigester back up to temperature and back up to running capacity. Troy's informed me that we get about a load a week. Right now we're getting, and this is for the feedstock, and for right now we're getting about a load a month. So again, this is corresponding to COVID. We do a lot of restaurants and a lot of private sector business as well that has been slowed down substantially. So this feedstock we are normally depending on is not coming in as readily. I would like to add a bright note to this. I don't really have one, but it's just it does seem to be COVID related, and Troy reassures me that our foaming issue is now gone, and we should be in the clear once we get this feedstock issue under control.
Tyler, a question for you. Now that the temperature outside is going up, will that help improve the situation?
Yes, 100%. Troy's given me more than weekly updates on this, as we know we want to get rid of this boiler as fast as we can. If we can just somewhat stabilize our feedstock, again, we need that gas volume to run our generator, which has the boiler in it. But if we can't generate enough gas, we don't have any heat, and we'll be back to the same thing of starting from scratch again. So it's we really anticipate that it will be off next week, and we'll be able to return this rental unit.
Thank you. Questions from the board? I don't see any. Brittany, would you take the vote, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Mayor Dwight Burley,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
Or
Mayor Scott Mackey,
In favor?
and Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on for our agenda, we're down to staff reports. I have a recommendation here that updated financial report for joint BioGRID facility be received for information. Do I have someone to move to put on the floor, please? I move by Deputy Mayor Gamble, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Cassie, do you want to speak to this or no? Does the board have any questions on the motion before us? Seeing none, Brittany, would you take the vote, please?
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Mayor Dwight Burley,
For.
Deputy Mayor Carlton,
or
Mayor Scott Mackey,
For.
and Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. We're down to public question period. Brittany, have we received any questions or statements from the public?
We have not.
Okay. So we're down to unfinished business. Update regarding assessment RFP for the BioGRID Lagoon. Further to the discussion and direction to staff on March 13, 2020 board meeting. Who is going to take this on? Does any staff member want to comment, or is it just mainly for the board, Brittany? Tyler, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Burley. I've reached out to Patty Cinnamon, CAO clerk, a couple weeks ago. She's got back to me. We've conferred that with the current declared state of emergencies that we're both in, that we are unable to produce a report at this time, and we asked for an extension. Just under the current circumstances, we've had a lot of fires, if you will, to put out. And this one has been, and again, we're asking for an extension to do this work.
Thanks, Tyler. Could we just leave it on our agenda so we won't lose it and bring it back at our next meeting, Brittany? Or okay?
Absolutely.
Mayor Mackey. Sorry, Scott, you're muted. Scott.
Mayor Mackey, you are muted. You can tap your screen and hit your mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering what sort of extension the staff are looking for in light of the financial reports and the operational reports. We really need to look at have this overview study done. You know, we continue to go in the wrong direction with this, so we need to get that information. So I'm just wondering how long staff think it would be until we can get that RFP out. Thank you.
Good question. Scott, or sorry, Patty or Tyler, you want to answer that?
I would. It's very difficult to presume or to anticipate our schedule right now, as everything is still being altered very quickly by government regulations. I would be definitely interested to hear Patty's schedule as well, because I'm certain she's in the same situation as well. Patty, if you'd like to propose a date, I'd be happy to work towards a goal or a common goal with you here.
Go ahead, Patty. I see your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. I think certainly, you know, because staff are working from home, but the other thing that we're experiencing here is because things have been on hold for the last several weeks, engineers are extremely busy, and so that might be, you know, part of our concern. But I think if we're looking at, this is June, if we're looking at a meeting in August or September, I'm sure we can bring something back then. That over the next few weeks we can start and get that RFP put together and hopefully have it back for our next meeting.
Thanks, Patty. Scott, does that answer your question? Tyler?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just hope that we can get on this as quickly as possible, because $114,000 deficit, we need to look at alternatives. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Go ahead, Tyler.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that, yes, I think that's a workable date as well, and understand this joint board's sense of urgency on this. It's understood.
Okay, thank you. Brittany, just for clarification, this is for information for us to discuss?
Correct. And
Okay.
the minutes will reflect that the draft RFP will be brought back to the next meeting of the board. I will remind the board that we have not established a date for that meeting as of yet, so that will be our next item of business.
Okay, we're down to new business then. As Brittany has indicated, we need to set a date for our next meeting. What is best for staff? I guess the way I want to put it out. Patty?
I'll just look at my calendar here while we've with holidays, and I wonder about what about either the first or second week of September. Everybody's going to have different holidays over the next couple of months. So.
What's the board's wish? Deputy Mayor Carlton, any comment?
Either week there is fine with me. Like, whatever works for staff, I think I can work around.
Deputy Mayor Mackey, what is your preference?
Yeah, the first couple of weeks of September is fine. Hopefully we have that RFP done at that point.
Yeah.
October's not a good month because it's moose season.
Could I float the second Friday in September?
Okay. Is that acceptable?
September 11th.
Being the 11th?
Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yep, that works for me.
Yes.
That's the date then, Brittany? Okay, and you'll send out a meeting request anyway?
Yes, I can do that. Does the board have a preference in timing? Did 8:30 work well for everyone?
I think it's great.
It's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
Patty, you have your hand raised?
yeah, go ahead, Patty.
Thank you. Just to clarify, to make sure that we're all on the same page, was the board wanting to review that that RFP? I think the direction was to prepare the RFP to look at options. If we're having a meeting in September, if it's okay with the board, we could circulate it, but rather than have a meeting, allow us to circulate it to everyone, and we should be able to get a response back for that September meeting. To help move things along, if that's okay with council, rather than convening as a meeting to review that RFP first. I think if the board would give Tyler and I direction to issue that RFP and then have it back for that September meeting.
I think that would be good, and if the board have any comments, send them all through Brittany, and then Brittany can send it out to all the board.
Yeah, so we'll circulate that draft RFP before we send it, and then once we receive your comments, we can get it out. I don't think it'll be too big of a job at this point. I think the longer time what we need is probably a longer time for the engineers to provide responses right now. So the sooner we get it out, then we can possibly have it back for that meeting.
Thank you. Before I go to you, Tyler, Deputy Mayor Gamble, you had your hand up? You're muted, Brian. Brian, you're muted.
Yes, I agree with Scott there. The sooner the better. If we could have that done by September, like we're getting pretty well on in the year, and it'd be sure nice to have this done this year. So whatever the staff can do, that's great.
Thank you. Tyler, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to just confirm what Patty was saying as well. I think that's definitely doable. We can make that happen. From the unfinished business item, it's regarding the assessment of the RFP. I thought we had this one isolated down to more of I guess I'd like to go over the scope of the RFP one more time before we do proceed, if that's possible, just to get a general direction, because I thought this was more geared directly towards one option, which was the potential of clean out and shutting it down for a while.
I can answer that because I do not have it in front of me, and it's been so long I can't really remember. Can you send that out to the board so we could have a look at it?
Yes. No, I just if that's what we're after is an overall assessment, we have no problem producing an RFP for that. But I thought this is more of a general scope that we were going after with this last RFP request.
Cassie, go ahead.
We're producing a report.
So it was to look at what it would take to shut it down, the cost to shut it down and mothball it, if we'd be able to turn it back on once we shut it down, and we want to know the value of the equipment that is currently out there. Those were the three main things that I believed were to be in the RFP.
Scott?
Yeah, in addition to that, it was the value and the state of the lagoon, the overall value of the biodigester and lagoon, and the potential to operate the facility using the lagoons only, the costs associated with mothballing, and the process and timelines associated with doing so, implications of mothballing, including its effect on the existing equipment, and an analysis of the operating options at the facility, including operations strictly the lagoons and mothballing. So that's in the previous minutes.
That's correct.
Hey, Scott. Okay, Tyler, you have your hand up.
Well, I just want to say thank you for that clarification. I just want to ensure that we're definitely producing the right report here. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Does the board have any other concerns or questions on that? See none, I'll move on to agenda. Brittany, I see we have no closed session today. So we're down to our to the end. Our next meeting is September 11th at 8:30. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Deputy Mayor Gamble, second by Deputy Mayor Carlson. Is there any other business to be discussed? If there's none, I'll ask for Brittany to take the vote.
Hey, when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against adjournment at 9:29 a.m. Let me get my paper in front of me here. Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Or
Mayor Scott Mackey.
In favor.
And Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble.
Or.
Thank you, and we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, all.
same to everybody else. Bye.